Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd Podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Well, he filled in for me last week, popular talk show host in Chicago, really talented guy, Danny Parkins. I'll let him pop his book later, although he doesn't need my okay to do that. I thought I'd bring him on. It's an interesting time. I sort of have a rule, Danny. You and I both do volume work. We're on the treadmill. When you do 3 and 4 and 5 hours, local radio, a lot of shifts. Is yours 4 hours? Is that what your shift is?
Yeah, 2 to 6 p.m. Central. So 4 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah, it's the opposite of Tom Rinaldi, who does a remarkably poignant piece once, 15 times a year. Sometimes I'm so jealous of these people that got to do these masterpieces on the air, and you and I are on the treadmill half the time just trying not to fall off. But I always have a rule. Don't do Twitter after a cocktail or after a tragedy because you're too emotional, and it just gets... you're going to say stuff that you're like, I'm going to bow out. And it was interesting during the assassination attempt of Trump. I just had a lot of thoughts and I thought, I'm going to take the day off. I just want to learn more. So I don't watch a ton of television outside of sports and occasional politics, but I was literally just watching TV the last 24 hours, just curious, getting all the information. What is sort of your take when you're a sports voice? There's a non-sports tragedy in America, especially when you mix in politics. What did you make of it? What was your reaction, and how did you react?
Yeah, so I've got a 4 and a 2-year-old. So my mom was over for dinner. My wife was out of town, and there's just like pure chaos in the house with 4 and 2-year-old boys. And I glanced at Twitter and saw it. And because it's Twitter, you don't even really know if what you're seeing is real. And it looks so ridiculous. And then you're trying to like play Paw Patrol with your kids. And so like it's just a weird headspace to be in. But then I passed my phone to my mom to show her. And she's kind of amazed at the whole thing. Like, we know it's this huge moment, but we don't really lock in on it because I'm with a 4 and a 2-year-old, right? And so there was like the anxiety of what happened. Is it still happening? And then not being as glued to it as I would like to be until a little bit later in the evening. But, I think my take and opinion on this stuff has kind of evolved in terms of participating in the discourse. I'd rather do it in a forum like this than on the internet because tone gets lost in translation on the internet.
Yes. Yeah.
Everyone is so heightened, understandably, when something awful happens like that. But then the other thing, I have dialed it back a bit because I don't think many people are having their opinions changed. And so it's like, if I say what I feel, and I've got a lot of thoughts on this, I studied political science in college, I'm pretty politically active, I've got strong opinions on it, but it's like, am I either preaching to a choir, and so then who cares? You're in an echo chamber and you're saying things that people agree with, or are you just pissing off your audience? And who's really changing their minds anymore? And so what's the upside of sharing it? I have found myself more likely to have a conversation with my wife, with people in my very close circle of friends, and then consume all of the content. But I have definitely dialed it back a little bit, at least on the internet, in terms of participating in the discourse, because I just think the upside is so limited.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So I generally agree with you that I remember during a time when John Skipper ran ESPN, and there were a lot of young, mostly progressive people on the air, left-leaning.
Sure.
And they were talking a lot of politics, and I would watch the daily ratings, and they would come down and down and down. And I thought, man, there's a lot of platforms to talk about this. Probably not on your ESPN show. And that's kind of where I come down is the advantage of the volume is 10 minutes on something I can't get on the radio or FS1. And, you know, Danny, I've always said this. If I just did Sirius, my show would be different than it is now. If I just did television, it would be different. I have to use a radio clock on TV, which is sort of a disadvantage, but be that as it may, I do. Every platform, I would react differently. If somebody bought the volume and I just worked at the volume and did this, I would probably talk more non-sports. Is that I do believe that there's a responsibility. Nobody turns to Sean Hannity for football picks. I do believe there's a general responsibility that to stay on the course of the people paying me a lot of money. But I do think young people feel peer pressure. I don't, but young people feel like, well, will I get respect from my peers if I'm a 36-year-old broadcaster? I don't feel that. I don't give a damn. But have you ever felt some pressure among other young, smart young people? Hey, if I don't talk about this, what do I look like among my demographic, my age?
Definitely. And I mean, listen, like there's takes of me out there breaking that rule back in the day, and maybe some of it is or was peer pressure. I think a lot of us were learning as it went down. I mean, I was on the air doing 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., I believe at the time. It might have still been 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., but I was early in my career doing mid-mornings, middays in Kansas City when Sandy Hook happened. And it's like you're on the air talking about the Royals lineup construction, and these kids are massacred in a classroom. And it's like, well, it felt ridiculous to be sticking to sports in that moment. And then everybody was sharing all of their thoughts with Colin Kaepernick and Black Lives Matter and that movement because it was coming into sports.
Right.
And so I did feel like it would be completely disingenuous to tap out of the conversation as a smart, educated white dude of privilege with a platform. I was like, I got something to say on this, and I feel like I got some responsibility to say it.
Yeah.
You know, like, but I think that we've evolved. I think the industry has kind of evolved, and the data came in on some of that stuff. And so I don't know. Like, I'm not going to mention it much on my local radio show tomorrow. You know, I'm not going to grandstand. I'm not going to take calls. I'm not going to do an hour on an assassination attempt. I do local radio. I live in the suburbs of Chicago. I was at the 4th of July parade next to Highland Park's 4th of July parade when there was a 4th of July shooting, 2 years back. And so, you know, I talked about that as a parent. I knew a bunch of people who were there during it. So like that was like a hyper local story that we talked about. Yeah. But it's an inexact science, man. There's no great answers. But I didn't say anything with the assassination attempt on Twitter. Checked my mentions. It was just one person, so who cares? It was one person, but I thought about it. It's like, oh, you haven't condemned this? I'm done with your radio show.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Like, I have to comment on every single thing at all times. Yeah. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, that's kind of how, I think we're learning a lot. I think with the explosion of platforms, there are a lot of places to talk about a lot of things. And I thought, well, I'm going to wait for Danny on Sunday night to talk about it. And that'll be the place, that'll be the platform to do it. You know, after I've consumed all this stuff, and I've said before, I'm not a Trump fan, but I'm American and I'm an America fan. And that's where I land on this stuff. And it pissed me off. The Secret Service's, having two buildings 150 yards away with all the rifles today. I'm like, what an egregious, lack of forecasting by the Secret Service. So like to me, I saw a lot of conservative voices immediately jump on, but I will say that my first reaction was I was angry. This is not who we are. You know what I thought to myself for a second, Danny, if I may? I thought, have we become the country that when I used to watch CNN, I was absolutely sure we would never become? the crazy country, the country where there were, regular attempts at politicians' lives, and it was mayhem. And I thought, no, wait. I remember Reagan and Gerald Ford. This has happened. This has happened. We've had it. I've always been surprised it hasn't, to be honest with you. Athletes, there's mental illness issues. Guns are everywhere. I am always like, when I go to games, I'm like strangely vigilant, looking around at, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But I think my initial take was I was angry. What was if you had an initial take once you knew it was true, what was yours? All right, forget what the calendar says. The football season actually, to me, starts Saturday. The Baltimore Ravens open their camp for the rookies. DraftKings has a best ball millionaire contest. It is the biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed dollars in the prize pool. 15 million from DraftKings. That's a big number. With two millionaires being crowned for first and second place. That is life-changing. If you're a set it and forget it type, then best ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger rosters so injuries won't end your season, only the draft, and that's it. You are set for the season. I like that, right? So you can play it and have a life too. Check it out. This year, DraftKings offering everyone a draft one, get one special. Everybody gets this. Your $20 entry fee, that's it, $20, scores you a bonus ticket. So get ready for the best ball week at DraftKings. Download the DraftKings app. Takes 90 seconds. Put in the code Colin. That's me, Colin. All customers who enter NFL Best Ball 15 million millionaire contest get a bonus ticket. Only during Best Ball week. Only on DraftKings.
So it's odd because I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan, but like that all washed away immediately. It's like
same.
Right? Like, but it was relief in a weird way because it's obviously terrible and tragic, and someone did lose their life in addition to the shooter. But man, what would this country feel like right now if it was an inch to the right?
No question.
You like that part of me, that's the thing that I can't shake, is it would have been broadcast on national television. We've got an election in 4 months. I hate when people say as polarized as ever. I don't believe that. We had a civil war, but we are very polarized. People are very angry. People are very armed. And it would be very, very, very uncomfortable. It already is uncomfortable. Don't get it twisted. I mean, the Republican convention is 75 minutes north of me in Milwaukee, and the Democratic convention is in Chicago in a month. So like, it's, I'm very close to it. It's happening. The tensions are going to be high. But my God, like, inch to the right, do I leave my house since yesterday? You know what I mean? Like what would we be feeling if that had happened? So it's really weird because it's not, anger is probably more appropriate, but relief. And then the only other thing I'll say to what you said, man, like I'd like to think that that's not the country that we are, but I don't have much evidence to support that statement. You mentioned Reagan, obviously Dr. King. There were plenty of threats that we know of made against Barack Obama and his children that have come out publicly. We've had shootings at every place that should be a safe haven, from a grocery store to a college campus to a kindergarten classroom to a movie theater. So we have people marching with tiki torches. We got. It's not great. Like it better than it's been. You know what I mean? Like I don't think we're in our worst time ever. I'm not saying that, but this idea that like we are somehow totally above that.
Yeah.
I can't say I was shocked, Colin. I can't say I was shocked. I was angry. I was relieved. But I can't say I was shocked, which is terrible. Just terrible. So
Yeah.
it's a jarring thing. And I'm 37 years old, right? Like I don't remember Kennedy. I don't remember Reagan. I obviously wasn't alive for Kennedy, but like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? That is definitely the highest profile assassination attempt in my lifetime that I have
Yeah.
any sentient memory of. So yeah, it's scary, man. It's scary.
Yeah, it's I had a scheduled dinner. I hung out with my son all weekend up in Portland, so I went to dinner right after and had a drink with another friend and was on a plane flying home. And I kind of looked around and thought, I wonder what the reaction will be today and this morning. And Brian Stelter, that writes for the Vanity Fair, he had an interesting X Twitter post today that he said, we're not at each other's throats as much as you think we are on social media, that we're on planes together and in grocery stores together. And, a lot of times moments like this, I can remember right after 9/11 for about 2 weeks, people were so kind to each other. It
Oh
was
yeah.
like, whoa, 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 whoa. We are being attacked. It was a collective, us against them. And I've thought about this a lot, Danny, over the course since 9/11, is that where we are? That assassination attempts and horrific tragedies is like the only way we're together. It's one of the reasons, for the record, why I love sports. It is the
Yep.
one unifier. I mean, like, wasn't the country pulling for the Cubs in the World Series? They were. I mean,
Yeah.
I can remember the Eagles and Nick Foles and Brady. Everybody wanted Nick Foles to win. And it was like, in a weird way, it was like, this is what's great. When you go, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, even though people see it as polarizing, people are so into the WNBA now. This morning, I'm like looking at my sports on TV calendar. I'm like, okay, Spain, England. I want to watch Caitlin Clark. And I thought, wow, what a pivot for me that is. And I want to move into that. Is that weird segue, but I never wanted to be an 80% NFL show. And as I've done this, the longer I've done this, the NFL now has so separated for a variety of reasons from every other sport that there was a point about a year or two ago when college football was still very Bama dominated that I wasn't talking college football. And I thought, God, you could put my show, it feels like, on the NFL network. And that's not a goal of mine. The WNBA to me has been such a breath of fresh air, not because I'm woke or not because I feel that women deserve attention in sports, because it's good, it's polarizing, it's kind of tribal, it's captivating, and it allows me to get out of the NFL bubble. Do you ever feel a little bit sometimes like, God, I'm doing 75% NFL talk and I can do more than that?
Yeah, well, it was funny filling in for you. I'm in that pitch meeting and I'm pitching your terrific staff takes. And I had, it was NFL, Team USA, things like that. A little bit of Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese Rookie of the Year. And so I had all the takes that I wanted to do. And then I said, so like, but you guys are the experts on like how Colin would structure a show. What should be like the lead? What's the A block? Because it was July 8th. There was nothing going on, which is why you were on vacation. And they were like, oh, well, your Dak take should be the lead. I'm like, but nothing's happening with Dak. And they're like, say that he took off his boot and then do your Dak take. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. So that's like enough. And of course there's a reason for it. Everybody cares about it. Huge team, huge fan base and all of that. But yeah, it's definitely something that if and when I'm doing more stuff in your world and orbit, I'll feel that way. But local radio, baseball still matters a lot.
Yes.
So I do a lot on the Cubs. The White Sox are historically bad, and that's actually kind of interesting. Either be great or be awful. Don't be a 76 win team. So the White Sox are historically bad, and that's providing a little bit of humor. And then the Cubs are really interesting with a huge fan base that's super engaged, and we air the games. So there's a new baseball game every day. And so there is at least something there. So locally, I am not as starved for topics sometimes that have mass appeal. But Angel Reese is in our backyard here in Chicago.
Yeah.
So like, I do think while I am not watching games first quarter to fourth quarter and like completely locked in, people are more interesting than teams.
Yeah.
And these people are interesting stories that people have a lot of opinions about. So
Right.
I'm all for it. And we have been doing some, and frankly, we're probably going to end up doing more.
You know, I was thinking about this, knowing that you were coming on today. I was walking through the Portland airport, and this is just kind of random, but I was thinking, so 1972 was the first year I watched sports on a black and white TV in my bedroom. I watched a Laker Blazer game on CBS. Brent Musburger was the announcer.
Wow.
And then I watched the Washington Miami Super Bowl. The Dolphins won 14-7. I can almost go team to team, roster to roster on that one. And I was a huge fan in the mid 70s of mostly National League, but of baseball. And I can go through the Reds lineup. I was National League, Phillies, Pirates, Reds, Dodgers. First American League team I really liked. I liked Reggie Jackson of the Yankees. And then I liked George Brett was my favorite player. I liked those Royals teams with John Mayberry, Amos Otis, Freddie Patek. You know,
Willie Wilson.
Yeah. I mean, those were and they AstroTurf, rounded corners, triples everywhere if you hit it in the corner.
Bags of cocaine falling out of their pockets. Yeah.
And then I was thinking about that because I had a long walk in the airport today, and I was thinking about you and about Cubs, and because I had looked up some stuff from you, and I thought, I don't know if it was the emergence of the Seahawks in Seattle, John Elway, Dan Marino, but there was a point early to mid 80s, because I was a AAA baseball announcer out of college. I got a very lucky gig. I got really, really lucky. There was a point about mid 80, 86, 87 that I felt myself like was into NFL more than baseball. I was all baseball, like 74 to 84.
Yeah.
And then I just pivoted. And I thought, why? There weren't devices to distract me. I think a lot of it was some of the personalities of baseball, Pete Rose, maybe Johnny Bench, guys I loved, maybe mid to late 80s, moved out of it. In the NFL, it was more about the star quarterback than the team. It was becoming more of a passing league. But I was initially a baseball fan. What was your 9 years old? What were you into?
Basketball and baseball. But like, so I talk about this all the time, like that sweet spot of being 10 years old. You're old enough to convince your parents that you can stay up late occasionally. You have no other real interest. Like school doesn't really matter. I'm not chasing girls, but you're collecting sports cards. And so you can remember statistics. And so I'm born in 86. And so that makes me at 10 years old. That's 96. That's the beginning of the second Jordan three-peat. And that takes you to you're 12 years old, 98, summer of 98, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, the home run race. I'm a kid raised on the north side of Chicago before we moved to the suburbs, 3700 Lakeshore Drive. You could see out the 16th floor of our apartment building, you could see Wrigley Field from the fire escape. So like I'm a North Sider going to Wrigley. It was the stereotype of mom and dad taking you out of school on opening day to go to the game. I was at the one game that Michael Jordan played in a major league stadium when he was on the Birmingham Barons, which was at Wrigley Field, and a crosstown classic and an exhibition game. So like the blending of basketball and baseball in Chicago in the mid to late 90s was my main thing. And while I loved the NFL, my mom is from Kansas City and a Chiefs fan. My dad was from the south side of Milwaukee and a Packer fan. There wasn't really a Bears influence in my house. And so when the NFL Sunday Ticket came out, my parents were like the first people to get it. because they're like, we got to watch our teams. They're not on TV here. This is amazing. So when I was a kid, I thought, well, the Cubs have Sammy Sosa and the Bulls have Michael Jordan. I'm going to be a Cowboys fan. Like in like the early mid 90s, I was like, my team's just supposed to be the most interesting with the best players. And so I was a Cowboys fan. It's like Deion Sanders is the coolest guy I've ever seen. And so while I loved it all, I was drawn more to personalities than teams, superstars, and it felt like why would you root for a bad team?
I always felt that.
like why would you root for an uninteresting bad team? I'm going to root for Sammy Sosa and Michael Jordan. And it was a real awesome time to be a kid in Chicago or the Chicago suburbs.
I'm the opposite. All my Seattle teams were awful. And so I liked other teams because mine were unwatchable. Yours were great. So you're like, I like the good teams. Mine were terrible. So I like the good teams. I was like, I love the Reggie Jackson Yankees, not the Mariners.
Sure. And that's why I was like, the Bears. I was like Eric Kramer, no, thank you. And like, he's a top 6 quarterback in Bears history. And I was like, ugh. Yeah. So I like I was like, why would you watch bad sports when there are good sports? Yeah. And I bonded a lot with my dad on like going to games, and, he would tell me about seeing Henry Aaron back in the day, and like, Lou Alcindor and like in that era. And so then like, you want to go to a college football game? I was like, yeah, sure. But it's Chicago. There's no good college football teams. It's like, no. We're going to go to South Bend and see Notre Dame USC. I was like, oh, so you just want to go to good games too. Like,
right.
So it was just like our thing. We just, if there was a good game in a reasonable radius for us to go to, like that was like, oh, this is your Christmas present. We're going to get tickets and we're going to go to this awesome game. So that was a big part of my childhood.
So I always kind of roll my eyes. I am numb to kind of criticism. I think, I work hard. I do what I do. I got a great staff. My staff, we just don't really, we do content. We don't have time to look back. My rule has always been, I have opinions. You can have opinions on my opinions. I'm not going to have an opinion on your opinion of my opinion. Like, I got 3 hours to fill tomorrow. But I like, and I see it infrequently, I think sometimes the internet has scared away a lot of sports hosts, not political hosts. They don't care, but sports hosts are either more insecure or more defensive. Sean Hannity, Rachel Maddow, Olbermann, they don't care. But a lot of sports guys are bothered by getting picked on by, whatever the site is. And so nobody wants to be told you have a hot take. But the truth is, I like sportscasters who are like, I'm going to lay it out here. Like, I don't get this. And about 2 years ago, this was my hot take. And I'm going to ask for your hottest take. And my hot take was, Luka is just a much better version of Carmelo Anthony. Not in great shape. And after about 4 years, you're never going to be Steve Prefontaine. Okay? I can come to terms with it. A prodigy offensively, therefore never really had to be engaged defensively to matter. In the end, his teams will be lopsided, and he'll go through teammates. He'll work with some, never ideally with any, but he's a better version of Carmelo. And I don't think it's a hot take because Melo did not complain to the officials as much as Luka. Luka's much more like Magic Johnson. Like it's just a constant chatter. But my take is that he's better than Melo. And both are first ballot Hall of Famers. I mean, Melo, for his lack of postseason success, is an all-time scorer. He's way up the list, right?
Yeah.
Is that Luka's a better version of Melo? He's never going to be in great shape. He was such a prodigy. It would be like being a pianist, a prodigy at 7. You're probably not going to be great at sports. You're not going to be great at other things because you're just going to lean into your artistry on the piano, right? And I think they're so gifted offensively, where LeBron never had a great jumper early. He was gifted physically, but he wasn't a pretty offensive player. He really had to work at it. Melo at 12 could hit an 18-footer and it looked like art. It was a Monet. And that's my hot take is that Luka, we're going to look back. He's going to be a top 5 scorer. He may get a ring. He's never in great shape, not really engaged defensively. And he'll go through a series of teammates. Some he gets along with, many he doesn't. That's my hot take. Where's yours?
It's a good one. It's a good one. Luka a better passer than Melo. So I even
Yes.
like more complete all around game.
Yes.
Like
No question.
Melo pure score. Luka's man. I mean, I have so many that like aged poorly and like immediately. Like you do this for long enough, you do like if people like pick on me or get mad at me for like me just being wrong, I'm like, okay, then you document 20 hours of opinions a week and we'll see how you do. Like you know what actually like first desensitized me to not caring about being wrong? Gambling. Like I've been gambling on sports longer than I've been hosting radio shows professionally.
Yeah.
I started gambling on sports when I was recovering from back surgery in high school. I was 15 or 16 years old. It was like, yeah, you're wrong sometimes on your predictions.
Right.
I mean, listen, I said there was a 0% chance that Tony La Russa was going to get hired as the manager of the White Sox. He was hired 4 days later. I said John Baldwin was going to be a Hall of Famer. He was an incredible bust. There are so many that are. Listen, I said that I would trade my dog for Deshaun Watson for him to be the quarterback of the Bears. And 5 days later, there were 65 accounts of sexual misconduct that came out against Deshaun Watson.
Oh God.
So like I've had some real ones that blow up my face, but it's funny. You know the one from the 6 hours of doing your show that I'm getting killed for the most in my group chat with like my friends. Nick has gotten on me. They're like, you think Justin Herbert's the third best quarterback in the world to start a franchise with? I'm like, yeah, I do. They're like, you know, he has no playoff wins. Yeah, but there has to be an eye test. I have to be able to say that, yes, he has no playoff wins. He has a horrendous blown lead. There have been multiple coaches that have been there, but I have to be able to trust myself that no matter what a grade looks like from a scouting service or a yards per attempt or a win-loss record, I have to say that when I watch these games, when I watch 11 hours of football start to finish on a Sunday, who's more physically talented than that dude throwing a football?
Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. That's it.
That's the list. And my list was Mahomes 1, Allen 2, Herbert 3, Stroud 4. People are like, how do you not have Stroud in front of him? I'm like, well, Stroud was amazing, but he's done it one time. He had 23 passing touchdowns. Like it was an incredible year. 5 interceptions, over 4,000 yards as a rookie. No one thought Nico Collins and Tank Dell were going to be things, and now he's made them into great players. But like he did it once. No one's thrown for more yards through the first 5 years of a career than Justin Herbert. And I know Anthony Lynn was terrible at clock management. And I know the Chargers have been cursed with injuries. And I know he's had 3 different play callers or 4 different play callers now since he's been into the league. I'm like, at some point, I just have to trust my eyes. And there's no doubt in my mind that Harbaugh and him are going to win big. So I haven't sold a share of Justin Herbert stock. Like if the Bears would have traded the rights to Caleb Williams for Justin Herbert, I would have been like, I get it. Like it'd be hard for me to pound the table because Caleb is so much cheaper, but I just think that dude's so unbelievably talented that I'm willing to go down with the ship.
Now, is there a hot take that you're proud of? I'll throw one out. I said Johnny Manziel and Zach Wilson can't play a lick.
Oh, good for you.
I was like, nope, Johnny Manziel. And by the way, I've met Johnny. There's qualities about Johnny that I think are great. I think he's probably a great hang and a great friend. If you had to pick NFL quarterbacks to go party with on a Friday night, he'd be a blast. He'd be funny. He's cocky. He's smart. Probably tells great stories. I said, I don't care what Nick Saban says. That is not an NFL quarterback. He's not disciplined enough. His shoulders, his waist, he's too tiny. He's small. People think Baker Mayfield, but I always said Baker's overdrafted, but he can play. He's a franchise quarterback. People think I hated Baker. It's like, no. He's draftable. I just wouldn't draft him as a GM. I don't like his temperament as a 20-year-old. I also said Zach Wilson, and I think Joe Douglas is a good GM. I'm like, guys, go to the 3 best teams he played in college. He won during a COVID season. He can't. This is not an NFL starting quarterback. So pat myself in the back. Do you have one you took shit for, but in retrospect, you're like, I'm kind of proud of that one because I was on an island?
You know, it's so funny. I mean, like, again, there's 100 of them. because you know what I mean? Like I'm so right about so many things and so wrong about so many things that I
Right.
don't even really like think about it in those terms. But so my wife went to Clemson and we were in Mexico and Clemson was playing Georgia and there was like a 20-inch TV on in like the sports bar and the all-inclusive resort that we were at. And Clemson, in their first game of the season, they were starting fifth-year senior Cole Stout.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we were just like dating at the time. It's like one of our first trips we took together. So I'm watching more college football because of her. She's super into it. I'm like, all right, let's check out this Clemson team. I'm like, oh, Cole Stout, this guy stinks. 3 possessions into the game, they bring in a true freshman by the name of Deshaun Watson. And this guy throws a ball 60 yards in the air. And I'm just like, who is that? And she's like, I don't know. Like she's a fan, but she doesn't know that like she's not following like recruiting. And I'm like, who is that? She's like, I don't know. I'm like Googling it. I'm like, that guy's your quarterback. That guy's going to win a Heisman Trophy. That guy's going to the NFL. He's going to be the first pick in the draft. And he wasn't. But I ended up watching every game that he played in college. We went to Arizona to watch him in the title game against Alabama when he had 4 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and they lost because Nick Saban onside kicked to keep the ball out of his hands. So it's not like the hottest take in the world because he was obviously a big time recruit, but I pride myself on actually watching the games. Like,
Same.
I'm like, I'm going to watch the games and I try not to be terribly on Twitter during the games. I try not to see everyone else's opinion on things while I'm watching I try to watch the game, have an opinion, and then see if I'm in the majority, the minority, or I'm alone on an island. And so I felt like with him, so the Bears had the 3rd pick in the draft, they traded up. And I was like, I don't understand this. I was like, I don't get the Mahomes thing. I don't get the Trubisky thing. Mahomes is from the Big 12. They've never put a good quarterback into the NFL. It's the air raid. There's no way that'll work. Mitch Trubisky, he's in the ACC with Deshaun Watson. He's started for 1 year. And you're telling me that a guy who played Bama in back-to-back title games, won one, lost one, and is the first 4,000, 1,000-yard guy in college football history, you're telling me that's not the number 1 pick in the draft? And so I was just banging the drum for the Bears to take Deshaun Watson. And obviously he goes 3rd. He would have been much better than Trubisky. The personal off the field stuff, who could have known? That aged very poorly. But when he had that 5,000-yard, 4,800-yard season with Bill O'Brien at 23 years old, I was like, I told you. I was like, I told you this guy's better than Mitch Trubisky. I'm like, I should be the GM of the Bears. So, and honestly, isn't that an obvious point? Like, what do these guys get paid for to do 20 hours a week of work to say that a 1-year starter at North Carolina is
Listen,
how does that happen?
Listen, I'll give you an example. And so Greg Cosell, I was in
He's great.
Yeah. And so Greg and I connect every off season before the draft, and he'll say, hey, I want you to watch 3 or 4 guys, before the season this year in college football. He'll give me a list of guys to watch. He gave me Josh Allen. He said, watch this kid. He's really rising. So I watched him against Iowa and Oregon, and he was horrible in both, but he had a howitzer. He had an arm he looked like a pony out of a barn that nobody had ever taken the time. And he was just romping wildly all over the field. And I'm like, he made a throw into the corner of the end zone. And I was just like, that's above the NFL. That arm strength is serious. So he told me a few years ago, he goes, I was on vacation. He goes, watch Mitch Trubisky. Tell me what you think. So I watched him. It was against Florida State. And I called him and I said, that's not it. The ball dies at 20 yards. Nope, that's a backup. Athletic, but a backup. And then he gave me his report. He sent me his report, and he called him a front leg thrower. And he goes, you and I see this exactly the same. So, and a lot of times Greg will test me, and, Greg knows what he's really doing. And I also lean on a lot of my GM buddies and executives. I'll be like, some of my strongest opinions, one of the reasons I loved Sam Darnold so much, I liked him, I knew him, but like 2 of my GM friends were like, He's pretty good. He's got a quirky release, or he's got a slow release. And he could never speed that slow release up. He just never could. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's really weird. Like, so the Jets, Joe Douglas, I think is an excellent GM, but he missed on a left tackle on a quarterback. I'm sorry, you can't miss on those two positions, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I always think if I was a general manager, the one thing I would avoid, and I think Ryan Poles in Chicago has done a great job. I hated Velus Jones out of Tennessee because at USC, I knew assistant coaches, and they said he can't track the ball. He's got to be a punt returner. He can't track the ball as a receiver. He doesn't have the feel for it. He was a speed guy out of college in Alabama. So I hated that pick, but he's redeemed himself. He's made pick after pick after pick. It's been very good. But I always think if I was a GM, if I didn't do this, my favorite job would be a GM in the NFL. I do mock drafts on paper. My staff makes fun of me, is that I would not dabble in free agency much. I would be pretty contrarian on that. I'd be a little bit like Chris Ballard. I would wait it out. And then by day 5, I'd get the 4th to 6th best pass rusher. Because I think it's fool's gold. It's like buying a used car. If a team's letting somebody go, they know the odometer. There's an issue with the car, right? It's like if a house is for sale, first thing I always ask is, how long did they live there? Because if it's a weird neighbor and it's had 2 owners in 5 years, it's probably a neighbor issue. Like you have a crazy person, right? Like that, fires off a shotgun randomly. So I think that's the one job in sports. But if I didn't do this, that would be my favorite job. But I will tell you, and Bill Polian and I had these conversations on and off the air when I was at ESPN, quarterback is, Bill was known for first and second round hits. He said, boy, you start drafting quarterbacks. It's a lot of heart. It's a lot of toughness. It's a lot of cognitive discipline. He said, there's a lot of stuff here. You can't measure it anywhere. And he told me, he said, you're going to miss. You just have to, he goes, we had Peyton Manning. We didn't have to worry about it forever. He said, right. But I know smart guys that have missed on quarterbacks.
Oh man, it's so interesting. Like they haven't figured out how to, and they tried with the S2 test, but then it looks like CJ Stroud just broke the S2 test. They haven't figured out how to really measure if a quarterback is going to panic or like his brain is going to speed up or slow down once the ball is snapped.
Right.
They can evaluate the film. They can do it on a chalkboard. They can do the mock interview, but there's a huge difference between college. The play call comes in, you just do it, and you've got to verbalize the play call in the huddle. You've got to verbalize a second play call in the huddle. You've got to have a check with me. You've got defenses that are as best athletes in the world doing all sorts of confusing things. And then a guy comes unblocked. What the hell are you going to do? Do you calmly hit your check down, or do you panic and run backwards out of bounds like Mitch Trubisky would do? And it's like, I had a guy who scouted him who was like, no, Mitch Trubisky. I was like, how did you guys spend 5 hours with Mahomes and 5 hours with Trubisky and feel like this guy was smarter than that guy? And he's like, he aced his on the board test. He aced it. It's that he couldn't do it when the bullets were flying. So it's a hard job. And if you have the quarterback, it makes everything easier. And I know what I would be susceptible to. I would be susceptible to ridiculous athletic feat of strength that has nothing really to do with football, but is just cool. Like
the
300-pound guy who jumps out of a pool. I'm like, what? Joe Milton. Have you seen the videos of the quarterback from Tennessee? I think he went to the Patriots.
Yes.
He was in the Orange Bowl, and in practice, he took an orange and threw it 105 yards. I'm like, he should be the number 1 pick in the draft. Apparently he can't read a defense for anything. I'm like, I don't care. I would want him on the team, and I would just be like, throw it to Randy Moss deep. Like, so I know I would need someone who would be a little bit, and I would draft every weed guy. Like every guy who failed a pot test and fell 10 spots in the draft. I'd be like, there's a market inefficiency. I'm drafting you. So I know I would have my blind spots as a GM. Character, like it obviously matters, but sometimes I think these guys forget that they're building a football team and you don't need 53 choir boys. I'm like, why is Jalen Carter not a Lion? Like, I don't really understand that. Like, that was like the most obvious pick in the world. They needed someone to put inside for Aiden Hutchinson outside. You've got Dan Campbell as a coach. Like, you had your, I don't, like, that was the most, they're like, he doesn't fit with the culture. I'm like, then why do we have coaches? Like what? Like, and then he goes to Philadelphia and it's of course perfect. And so like I would draft the questionable character guy. I would draft the freak of nature at like 99th percentile athlete. But I'd also like to think that I wouldn't draft Mitch Trubisky over Deshaun Watson. I'd like to think that I could do the job better.
You know, it's what's interesting about the character thing is I actually, and I've said this more than once, the overwhelming majority of pro athletes, at least the domestic ones that we watch in college, or you know, if somebody comes from overseas, I don't know much about their history, but I think 98% of our athletes are such good kids. You know, I'm 60.
Oh yeah.
Like, do you know how lucky we are that our star quarterbacks are Herbert, Mahomes, Lamar, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow? It's like you could have just a schmuck. I mean, nothing against Jay Cutler, but he was not very likable. I knew people that were friends with him and they're like, not a great guy. You could have that, right? Like, you look at the NFL, go look at the NBA. Ja Morant went sideways and Zion has a weight health issue. Overwhelmingly, they're all like Chet Holmgren and Wemby and SGA. And it's like, there's good kids, right? Like, and now they're worth $100 million at 24 and they're still good kids.
The Bears drafted Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. We went to Detroit really just for like the theater of the mind and to paint the picture for the audience. It was a fun trip for the show. And the day after, the Bears were cool and they both called in. And it was 6 minutes back to back. They literally were in the same car and Caleb handed the phone to Rome. So we did 6 minutes with both of them. And they were both, I know you know Caleb a bit. I don't know if you know Rome.
Yeah.
But in 6 minutes, I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, it's so impressive how mature they are, how grounded they are, how prepped they are, how like 99th percentile athlete, but also like somehow 99th% of like polite, humble. It's completely insane. Like Caleb, the new athlete, Caleb Williams has a foundation. Everybody talks about how he made $10 million from NIL money. Like, okay, fine. Like in the course of his life, the $10 million, his dad made money. Like in the course of his life, like $10 million is going to actually be fairly insignificant. The guy has a charitable foundation as a drafted rookie. When has that ever happened? But that's the thing that you do after you have 2 contracts and you're in your 30s and you're thinking about a legacy after your career. So these guys are just so much more evolved and advanced and prepped and all of it that yeah, it's a lot of hand wringing by people that are jealous and uncomfortable that they got cut from the high school team or that they live paycheck to paycheck or whatever. These kids are largely amazing. They really are.
So when you filled in for me, you discovered how good the staff is. Yeah. And I tell the staff all the time, I said, we're lucky. Our management trusts us. We do our job and then we're home. We're on the road at 1 PM, 1:15, which in LA, I like my staff to get in early, but leave early. I don't want you sitting around in the building and stewing. Get out of here the minute you can get out of here. Go take a nap, go home, pick up your kids from school. So I'm a big believer in let's play the long game. The show, football season is like 6.5 months of almost no days off. It just wears people out. It's like being an accountant and it's 6 months of April. Like, just guys, get out of the building. And there are some quirks to doing the show. And I thought it was interesting reading what you said about it, because I don't think about it now, but it is incredibly cavernous and you're doing the show next to a show that ends. And I thought, oh, good hell, I should have warned him about that. So because Chicago's heard it, I've done it for years, so I don't think about it. But I get it. When I read it for you, I'm like, oh God, I should have told Danny, like, come prepared for the first 7 minutes.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, listen, like Alex and Kyle and Eric, right? Eric is your researcher.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, so the whole thing is incredible, right? So they told me a lot. Like I had a pre-call before I flew out there with your two top producers, Alex and Kyle. I had a pre-call with management and some of the management from LA. So like they gave me like a pretty good idea. The meeting starts at 6. The car will pick you up at 5:45. What do you want for breakfast? It can be in your dressing room between 7:30 and 8. Don't wear your clothes, but bring your clothes because they'll steam them and iron your shirt. Like they walked me through basically everything that was going to happen, but you're still not prepared for it until you get into the moment. And so like I walk into that conference room and I'm like, where do I sit? They're like, the head of the table. I'm like, okay. And there's 9 people around this table. I have 2 excellent producers, Shane Reardon and Chris Tannehill, and my co-host Matt Spiegel. And like I used to run my own board in Syracuse. Like it was a one-man band. And then in Kansas City, like you had one producer who also did the updates, who also booked the guests. Like, you know what I mean? So like I've had a theory a long time in this industry that actually like the higher that you rise up, there's obviously more pressure. There's more attention, but in some ways it's easier because you have more support. I was telling them about a thought about like Brock Purdy when just one of Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, McCaffrey, or Trent Williams is not there. And I'm like, I know the numbers go down, but it's pretty drastic for him. And like I said that, and then I was on to like a Cooper Flag thing that I was pitching in the meeting. And Eric just like stood up, walked over to the printer, walked over to my side, and like put a piece of paper down on the table next to me. Yeah. And he had the numbers in like 8 minutes. I'm like, it would take me 108 minutes to get one of them. It was incredible. And so your staff is excellent. But then, yes, it's finally time. I'm nervous. This is the biggest show I've ever fronted by far. It's 3 hours of national TV. And I said this not to your face, so I may as well say it to your face. Like, I do think that you have the hardest job in sports opinion because every other big show in sports opinion has someone out there with you. And I know that you have JMac, but like, it's First Take is a debate show. There has to be someone to debate. Get Up is a panel show. Undisputed is a debate show. First Things First is a chemistry show. PTI is a chemistry show. You're a monologue and take show. And so 3 hours of solo, I mean, Good Morning America, they got a panel. So 3 hours of solo TV and radio is no joke. And so, I am not too proud to say that I was nervous. I've done 4 hours of solo. I've done 5 hours of solo. I've done 24-hour broadcasts. It's not the length of the time. It's just that it's different. And that studio is bleeping huge. And I have now, it's huge. It's a barn. It's a barn. It's a barn. Radio studios are intimate by design because you're funny when you're comfortable and you're intimate and you can make eye contact with your producer and the whole thing. And so it's a huge room. And so that was disorienting. But then also, I've never met Skip Bayless or Keyshawn Johnson or Rachel Nichols. And so I'm a fan. I'm aware of who these people are. And so I am sitting in your studio or in your chair with The Herd, fairly powerful brand on like 100 LCD TVs all around me. And I'm getting ready to do this monologue into a camera, by the way. Like in radio, you talk to your people on First Things First. They're like, the one note they gave me was, don't look at the camera. You talk to Wilds, you talk to Broussard, you talk to Nick. You don't talk to the camera. On your show, you're monologuing to a camera. And so it's all like a little different and disorienting. And then I'm like, they're like, there's no break between the end of their show and your show. So I'm like, oh my God, like I'm opening with Dak Prescott. Skip Bayless is going to hear my Dak Prescott take. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't like really care if he agrees with me or disagrees with me, but like, I'd like him to think that I'm doing a good job. So it's just like, it's just you're just aware of it. And Skip goes like, tomorrow on Undisputed. Da-na-na. Like, and then it's like right into the herd. Like there is no break. It is so quick. And so I haven't gone back and put myself through the ordeal of watching the full 3 hours. I've watched the clips, I've watched some of it, but I was much more comfortable from the start the second day than the first day.
Yeah.
Because it's just, and I wasn't on radio. I was just on TV. So I guess your radio producers, you normally can see them.
Yeah.
There's a radio booth there. So, I mean, it was just Ashley Brewer, who was lovely, but she had never done Herdline before. She hadn't been on TV in a year. So we're like, man, they're really going to let us take this plane off the aircraft carrier here. And I kept asking your staff, and I you can cut me off or whatever if I'm rambling, but like I kept asking your staff, like, what's the out time? Like, how long should I take this? And they're like, don't worry about it. Like, just, we'll tell you need to wrap if you need to wrap. Because frankly, I've done some local television. Like, they're so good at, like, when I train, you do 2 takes and an A block or something. They're so good at the graphic changing immediately and the B-roll changing immediately and like the video kind of following my voice as I was transitioning from one thing to the next. Like, I was like, well, so like, what do I need to cue you guys? Like, in radio, if I want to like fire a sound bite, I obviously have eye contact with my sound guy, but it's like, you like set up a clip. In this, it's video. They're just following you with your voice. And so like, I have trust in your people now that I didn't have on like minute 1 of take 1. And so it's just, it's a very impressive operation that you've built. And they made a very unnatural situation, even for someone who I have my 10,000 hours of radio time. I do not have my 10,000 hours of TV time, but they made something that is just like unavoidably unnatural. They made me really, really comfortable. They were great.
Danny Parkins.
I'd love to do it again because I'd love to do it again because day 3, I would imagine, would be even better than day 2. So that's why that's why to get to do it again.
It's the opposite of baseball where the pitcher, they take the pitcher out so you don't face the batter for the 3rd time. We're different. Your best at bat is your,
Absolutely. Oh, and I mean, oh God. So like, I didn't get a ton of sleep. There's jet lag. And like, I'm nervous and there's nothing going on. Colin, I'm waiting for the car in the lobby of the hotel and I'm just scrolling Twitter, and Connor Orr posted 12 teams that can win the Super Bowl. And I was like, yeah, let's go, Connor. Beating that NFL beast, baby, in July. Let's go. Any way to talk some football. It was, it's fun, man. It's a really fun thing that you have built for yourself. It really is.
Well, I'm a huge fan. You're going to get a lot more swings at it. And, I have on more than one occasion told our staff, gambling, digital, filling in for me. In fact, it was interesting. They had said to me, and we'll wrap it up here. They had said, hey, how about you put Danny Parkins when Jason McIntyre's off, you put him on Herdline. And I said, no. Danny's a host. He's not going to be subservient to me. I don't want him to feel like he can't. I said, you put Danny in my chair. Let him go. I don't care if he makes mistakes. He'll be great. But I said, and that's not a knock at the people who do it. But I said, Danny's a host. It's like what Michael Jordan in Charlotte, did he tell like Kemba Walker? He said, take the shots. It's your team. Go. Right. Like he recently. Yeah. So that, that was the thing. It's like, put him in the big boy chair, let him rip. And that's why I say when I'm gone, Jason McIntyre, like put him in the big boy chair, let him rip. This is not a perfect business. It's a treadmill. Let the young guys go. It's the only way to get better. And you're both super talented. All right, buddy. It's great talking to you. Enjoy Bears camp, because I'm going to tell you something. You got about 15 different angles. And we'll bring you on the show, by the way, during the year. I love that. But I think you have first or second most interesting team in the league. So, and you don't say that about the Chicago Bears once in 50 years.
Right, I mean, Bears' most interesting team in football probably hasn't been the case since the 85 Bears.
That's it.
Which is one of the most interesting teams ever in any sport. So if this team could even approach that in terms of interesting, huge. And hey, the HBO producers agree with you. We got content coming up in August, baby. We got Hard Knocks.
Yep.
Hard Knocks recaps Tuesdays in August. I cannot wait.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Colin.